What have you got for us?
Well, as Darren said, this next one doesn't quite fit the narrative. So an MI5 spokesman in a briefing has said the opposite to what we're always told, which is that the real threat comes from the far right and people are being arrested for tweets left, right and centre. But let's just take a little look at this.
The headline split of our counter-terrorist work remains roughly 75% Islamist extremist, 25% extreme right-wing terrorism. But under that headline, much has shifted.
So, the next time that somebody says to you that the real biggest threat, not to say that it's not a threat, but that the biggest threat comes from the far right, you can cite that statistic. 75% of the threat comes from Islamists. Another aspect of this, of course, is that we all know that this threat is aggravated by porous borders. Islamists have been using the migrant crisis from the very start. And so it's even more important that we have this enormous problem on our hands with the ECHR, one of the reasons why both Tory leaders are making it part of their campaigns to leave the ECHR. So this week also we've seen two really significant pieces of evidence as to why the ECHR is putting British lives at risk. One of them is an Albanian murderer, somebody who was convicted in absentia in Albania, who has been ruled by the ECHR to stay here in the UK on the basis of his right to a free trial because he was convicted in absentia in Albania, and also on his right to a family life. Now, he came here in 1998 after this alleged murder and pretended to be from Kosovo. His family then joined him in 2000, weren't given asylum, but were, for some reason, given indefinite leave to remain. So what kind of family life are we talking about here? Well, one of his sons is in prison for 18 years for trafficking cocaine. His daughter is in prison for 4 years for supplying Class A and Class B drugs. So they said that the reason why he should stay here is because it would be unduly harsh on his family if he were to be deported. So that's what we're talking about there. And also this week, we've seen the sentencing of the Kurdish man, homeless Kurdish man, who pushed a stranger, postman, onto the tracks of the tube. He's just been sentenced for 8 years. But this actually took place while he was in the process of appealing his deportation for sex crimes. 21 offences: assault, antisocial behaviour, outraging public decency. They said he had a pattern of regular, serious offending, but of course, we had to keep him here. And he will stay here. He'll stay in British prisons, and who knows whether or not we'll be able to deport him.
Absolutely. So we're all still paying for him. Do you know what gets me is that the fella that pushed the postman onto the rail tracks, and he almost touched live electric wire on the Victoria line here in London. And this guy had been refused asylum in France and Germany, but then he gets to Britain, the ultimate international mug, and we say, oh, well, I don't see why we would throw him out, you know, come one, come all. He'd thrown his documents overboard, he lost all of those, he got to stay here, now he's staying at His Majesty's pleasure and we're all going to have to pay for him. I think frankly, it shows the political class for the weakness and inability to actually act and keep us all safe.
The thing is, we're being treated like complete doormats. Yes. And even when we try to do something about this, we just simply can't do it. So this guy, this Albanian guy that I mentioned, he actually went to prison for 33 months after he was given citizenship. He went to prison for 33 months for lying to get his passport. So the Home Office tried to deport him, and also the Albanians tried to extradite him so that he could be properly sentenced for this alleged murder that he'd committed in Albania, which was very serious, by the way, shooting somebody in the face with a Kalashnikov.
Yeah, which is a massive gun, isn't it? Like a machine gun.
But the point is that we can't seem to do anything about it, whereas when it comes going back to the Islamist point, we can arrest people for holding up a sign that says Hamas are terrorists for a public order offence because, they might be mobbed by the crowd who are, pro-Hamas, I suppose. And we have
Hezbollah ones.
You have people like Kay Burley questioning Robert Jenrick.
We've got to get through.
There's two very quick bits here. The first is that everything you have just said should be an advert for leaving the ECHR. There should be no other argument. That should be enough. But then secondly, we must be able to talk about this massive threat from Islamist extremists who are amongst us and come in every day.
Someone in the Met has finally said the quiet part out loud. Last week, in an interview with GBNews, the chair of the Met Police Federation, Rick Pryor, admitted that officers are no longer officiating without fear or favour for Londoners of all backgrounds. He said, following a string of vexatious investigations against officers from the Independent Office for Police Conduct, that officers are now afraid to call out bad behaviour from people from ethnic minority backgrounds for fear that they'll be smeared as a racist. Now, what did he get for this act of truth-telling? A suspension that may end his career. There are two stories here. There is the story that we all know, and that is that two-tier policing in the United Kingdom is real. It is being driven by a police establishment that has been infected by identity politics and egged on by Keir Starmer and Sadiq Khan. But the other story is that this is a culture that is rotten to the core. If you dare to speak up, if you dare to say the truth, you will be silenced, you will be punished. This is once great British institution, and I fear its reputation, which is in tatters, is beyond salvaging.
Yeah, I absolutely couldn't agree more. We do have a statement here from the Metropolitan Police Federation that I will read out. The Metropolitan Police Federation are aware that Chair Rick Pryor has been placed under investigation by the Police Federation of England and Wales. While this investigation takes place, Rick has been asked to step back from all Federation duties. The MPF are supporting Rick through this process. We hope that this matter is resolved swiftly. I mean, it gets to the heart of the entire problem with British policing, right? We're told ad nauseum that there is no such thing as two-tier policing. We had, of course, the Bianca case the other day where the police officers were given their jobs back after doing a stop and search. Stop and search is a key tool in prevention of stabbing and, knife crime. Now, it should be utilised more, if you ask me. Would you be upset if you were stopped and searched on the street? I think it is a nonsense to accuse everything of an ism or a phobia in the name of some social justice woke nonsense. BS, frankly, if I can use that acronym at this hour. So I have no time for it. I have absolute time for Rick Pryor. I wish him all the very best. But I think it is of detriment to British police and that we're losing figures like him who are willing to put their head above the parapet and actually say what needs to be said, because we are binding the hands of British policing in this woke nonsense that led to the grooming gangs. It led to turning, in the security services at least, turning a blind eye to the Manchester Arena case, because the fella on security said that he was worried he'd be accused of racism if he stopped the fella who did indeed have a bomb in his bag.
And children died.
Children died as a consequence. We have to get over this puerile nonsense where we are without a backbone in the most jellyfish-like fashion that leads to the loss of life.
Yeah.
I can't stand it. Let's move on from this. I don't care what you accuse me of, and we shouldn't care what British policing is accused of if they are doing their jobs and allowed to do it, like Robert Peel set out, without fear, without favour.
And actually, if they cared about policing properly and they cared about public trust, they would stand by him and stand by his statements rather than gaslighting the public. We have eyes. We experience this ourselves. When other communities experience certain things, it's all about their lived experience. But when you talk about the British as a whole and the experience of policing, it is demonstrably two-tier. I mean, it's so difficult to argue with that it can be nothing but gaslighting to suggest otherwise. So if they really wanted to, like I say, police properly and they cared about law and order, and I really think this is, part of the reason why we have such a problem with spiralling crime, because there are some people who just think that they can get away with anything because the police won't bother to investigate it. Yeah. The problem goes to the soul of policing in this country. It's not just a sort of surface-level two-tier thing.
Well, and we have seen it with our own eyes. We saw just before the Southport riots, we saw in Huddersfield, in Leeds, we saw in Whitechapel, we saw riots that were being carried out by ethnic communities that were just being left, hands-off policing, standing back, watching people carrying knives, asking them politely to put them in the local mosques. That was fine. But then Anywhere else, we saw the uprising around the 3 girls that got stabbed and the police went crazy and people went to prison.
Yeah, Andy, Shirley's commented, and Shirley says, I thought whistleblowers were supposed to be protected, right? Shame on Starmer. Well, she mentioned Starmer there.
I'm not quite sure.
It's probably his fault in some way. Perhaps he wasn't too pleased with the comments, who knows. But the key point there about protecting whistleblowers, surely he has a right to say this, or do you think actually it's fair play and maybe he needs some of these workers' protections?
Well, absolutely. And if you was watching later, they'll hear me talking about that. But I think there is a key distinction to be made here, that there's a difference between speaking out against an issue and whistleblowing. I think the term is being misused there. He wasn't whistleblowing, he was speaking on a more cultural issue. Whistleblowing would be a specific incident where he's been suppressed by a manager for speaking out against it. It's not whistleblowing.
When it comes to police and trade unions, as with all other trade unions...
Well, we don't have trade unions. The police don't have trade unions.
They have the federation that's supposed to be there for them.
So there's no industrial rights.
But do you think actually that this is a sign that these groups like the federation and, dare I say it, all the other trade unions not representing the police, if you say certain things, you are beyond the pale and you won't be protected by them?
Well, I think... No, I don't think that's... I
don't think there's a point in being a member of a trade union anymore.
Well, I think, the 4 million people that are members of trade unions would disagree with you there.
I think quote-unquote racist. Then.
Well, no, I think, he holds an elected position within a membership organisation. I hold elected positions within the trade union movement. If I said something that the wider movement disagreed with, I would probably be suspended from those elected positions. That happens. That would happen. Anything. That would happen across anywhere. If Darren, if you would say something that was very against what GBNews thought, you'd probably be suspended. That's the case in any position.
But I think
it's not a membership organisation or trade union issue.
But this is the fundamental problem. Why do they not think that? We can all see that two-tier policing is a thing. We all know this. He's speaking the absolute obvious. That's the real problem, is that they can't see this. And the fact that they're now trying to cover up is the real issue that we need to be talking about and need to address.
Indeed, I agree.